I do want to make mention, we're going to start announcing and get the word out and advertising too. April the 8th, that's Easter Sunday morning, we're moving our service from here to the elementary school gym. So we're going to have our service there. It's at 10:30, being regular time, but we will not be having Sunday school that morning. So we want to encourage you to invite some people out for that. Again, that will be the Easter morning at the elementary school gym. We will be setting up for that, I think, Friday evening. As far as I know right now, we're going to set up Friday evening, so about 7 o'clock if you want to come help set up chairs and tarps and all that kind of stuff. So, if you will, look at Genesis 37 and verse 2. We're going to start there. We're starting a new series today called The Dream Killers. How many of you ever, just growing up, you had plans, you had dreams, big dreams? Anybody? Nobody ever wanted to do anything when you grew up? What do you want to be when you grow up? What did you want to be when you grew up? Somebody tell me. Doctor. Anybody else? What were your aspirations?
Baseball player.
Baseball player. All right. Oh, what?
I wanted to be in a
Snickers commercial. All right. Well, anybody else? What kind of things did you want to be when you grew up? Scientist. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody want to be president? Bruce is not here. Well, let me ask you this. How many of you that didn't admit that you had dreams when you were growing up? You had dreams and plans, big plans. Whatever plans they were, you had plans and they just didn't turn out the way you expected. Probably all of us in here, if we were honest, would probably raise our hand and say, no, life just didn't turn out quite the way I thought it was going to, or that I had planned. And so we have these dreams and we have these plans and visions for the future. God has a plan for you. Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans I have for you, or the thoughts that I have for you. And He has planned before even the foundation of the earth, before you were even thought of, in 2012. He has plans and desires, and He has a purpose for you. And sometimes people and things try to crush those dreams or kill them. We're going to look at Joseph here. He had some dreams. And we're going to read through this rather quickly, and then we're going to talk about this, and we're going to look at it a little closer. But look at verse 2 of chapter 37. It says, this is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Now let's stop right there. So this is a good Sunday school lesson, right? We see Joseph in the coat of many colors, and we have the flannel board cutouts and stuff, things like that. It makes for a good Sunday school lesson, but sometimes we overlook it and just realize that, we forget to realize that the Old Testament was written for us to learn from and to apply, to our lives and things like that. So I want to get that picture there. This is relevant for us today, and we're going to see that. So he was out feeding the sheep, or the flock, and it says, and his father's wife, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. So now we're getting a picture here. If you know the story of Joseph, and you know what happens, you get a picture of why his brothers wanted to kill him later. As we read this, keep this in mind. So Joseph, he's out feeding the flocks with his brother, and he goes and he tells Dad about what his brothers have done wrong. Now, I did not have a brother or a sister growing up. I did have an aunt. She was like my sister. Many of you know that. And what do we call that when you go and tell on somebody? Tattletale. That's right. Anybody ever have a tattletale for brother or sister? Or brother or sister who's a tattletale? All right. So you know. Here Joseph is. He's like Mr. Goody Two-Shoes, right? He goes, and I'm going to tell on them. I don't know what they did. Maybe they beat the sheep or whatever, hit him over the head, whatever it was. And he goes and he tells on them. That's strike number 1. Look at verse 3. Now, Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children. Uh-oh, he's playing favorites now to Joseph. You see that? Because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made a tunic of many colors. Now, that's translated a coat of many colors, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. In the original, they're really not sure in the Hebrew what exactly that was. It could have been a coat that had sleeves sewn. And because usually what they would do is they would take a thing of cloth and they would fold it in half, about 5 foot long or 10 foot long. They fold it in half, cut a hole out, and stick it over their head, and tie a belt around it. They didn't even necessarily sew anything up. So it could have been that he had a fancy coat, not just a coat of many colors, but a fancy coat that had sleeves sewn into it. So he was his favorite son, and he made him some special coat, so he stuck out, strike number 2. Verse 4, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they what? Hated him, and could not speak peaceably to him. They hated him so bad that they couldn't find anything good to say to him. That's how bad they hated him. They could not think of one thing. They couldn't even live peaceably with him. Couldn't say anything peaceably. So they probably just kept their mouths shut and stayed away from him as much as they could. Verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers. And we're going to see what that dream is here in a minute. And they what? Hated him what? Even more. Wait a minute. That's pretty bad. If you can't speak peaceably to anybody, you would speak to them and say anything nice to them, but now they hate him even more. Do you see this hatred building? And so here they are. Now let's see what the dream was that Joseph had that made them hate him even more. Now he's a tattletale. He's the father's favorite son. They cannot stand it. Then he tells them this dream. Verse 6. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then, behold, my sheep arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheep stood all around and bowed down to my sheep. And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they what? Hated them even more. Can you imagine? Now we have this tattletale. Joseph goes to Dad and says, Dad, you should have seen what they did. He loves Joseph more than all of them. And he has this dream. He says, hey guys, listen to this dream. It's really cool. You're going to like it. Listen, I had this dream that my sheep stood up and you guys surrounded me and you bowed down to me. Isn't that cool? And they're like, no. Shall we indeed? And so they hated him even more. Verse 9, then he dreamed still another dream. And he told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream. And I'm sure they were just dying to hear it. And this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in his mind. So now, not only is his brothers going to bow down to him, he says, Mom and Dad. They didn't like that either. And so what happens? Go on down to let's go to verse 18. So Joseph, now remember, they can't speak anything peacefully to him. They hated him. They started off hating him. Then they hated him even more. Then they hated him even more. And so now Joseph is coming out to the field. His dad sends him out there. And here's what happens. Verse 18. Now when they saw him afar off, that's the brothers, even before he, Joseph, came near them, they conspired against him to what? To kill him. They saw him coming far off, and they just conspired to kill him. Verse 19. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Now they didn't mean that in a positive way, right? This dreamer is coming. Verse 20. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into the pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him. That he's going to deliver him later. It says that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to the father. Verse 23, so it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water. See, they went from going to just outright kill him to, okay, we won't kill him, but we're going to cast him in a pit and do what? Starve him to death. They had no idea Reuben was going to come back. They're just going to starve him to death. Let him go in there. Because notice it says, it points out there is no water in the pit. And they sat down, look at verse 25. And after they'd thrown him in there to starve to death, verse 25, and they sat down to eat a meal. How callous is that? That's how bad they hated him. They probably stood around and sat with their legs hanging over the pit, eating a sandwich. That's how hatred and hate-filled they were towards their brother. So then, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story, basically, they sell him off into slavery. They decide to make a buck. Now, we're just not going to let them starve. We can make some money off of it. So they pass it off to their father as if some wild animal has eaten him. They sell Joseph into slavery. Joseph goes to Potiphar's house. He's sold to Potiphar, who is a high-ranking official in Pharaoh's military, in his service, I should say. And Joseph is made ruler over his household and all his goods. And so, if you know the rest of the story, we know that Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph of trying to rape her. And so he gets thrown into prison. And he's in there for 2 years. And he comes before the Pharaoh's butler and his baker. And he interprets this dream for the butler. And he interprets it and he says that Pharaoh is going to reinstate you. And he said, just remember me when you get out of here. And guess what the butler did? He forgot it. And he was in there for 2 years. And so, finally, Joseph, if you will remember, he raises up to second in command over Pharaoh. What I want you to point out is this. Time after time, he's got this dream. If we were to go through here, I could point out to you several things this morning. Jealousy tried to kill the dream. Pride tried to kill the dream. Fear, envy, anger, greed, on and on. And we see that time and time again in our lives. Anytime a dream is attacked, it's usually attacked by someone or something dealing with those kind of issues. And over the next several weeks, we're going to look at the things that try to kill the dream. And jealousy. Jealousy says, I resent that you have a dream and I can't give that dream out. Pride says, my dream is better than your dream. My dream is bigger than your dream. You know anybody who you tell a story and they've done one better? I mean, every time. You tell a story, just trying to tell a story. You just try to tell a little bitty story. You know, get across the point, well, oh yeah, well, I've done this. And then you start thinking, well, you know, I've done something a little better, so you pull this out, and they've done something even better. But pride says, my dream is bigger, my dream is better, so your dream doesn't matter, so it tries to kill the dream. And then there's fear. There's fear. There's envy. Envy says, I want your dream. I want that for me. And then there's anger. We're going to talk about anger, I think, next week. I think that's where we're going to go. And how anger kills the dream. And greed. We see that time and time again. 2 Corinthians 2:11 says, Paul says, lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices or his schemes. And these schemes have not changed from the beginning of time. From in the garden. Jealousy, pride, fear, envy, anger, greed, all come usually from the father of lies. Many of us have a dream. We have a dream right now. Maybe it's being crushed. Maybe it's already been crushed. Maybe it will be attacked, because I'm sure it will. As bad as it got for Joseph, again, we know the rest of the story. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream. He was made second in command. And because of that, he saved many, many people from the famine, especially his family. Now, if you're still in Genesis, turn to Genesis chapter 50, just a few chapters over. And we're going to look at verse 20. Joseph's father passes away. And the brothers think he's going to get revenge on us because of what we've done to him. But he doesn't take vengeance on him. He doesn't take retribution. He says in verse 20, he says, but as for you, speaking to the brothers, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. So he says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. You see, the dream that he had wasn't just about him being in greatness. It was about saving these people. It wasn't just about Joseph. Now turn with me over, if you will, to Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. in verse 25. Well, let's start verse 24. Verse 24, for we were saved in this hope. But hope that is seen is not hope, for why does one still hope for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. Likewise, the Spirit also helps in our weakness, for we do not know what we should pray for as we ought. But the Spirit Himself makes intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. Let's read that verse 26 again. Likewise, the Spirit also helps in our weakness. You know, it kills me. I've said this before, but you know, when people say Christianity is simply a crutch. Christianity is for weak people. And many of you know what my answer to that is. When I hear that, when somebody says that to me, Mark, Christianity is a crutch, and Christianity is for weak people, I look them right in the eye and I say, you're right.
Amen.
I am weak. And I need Christ. And I need His strength. Have you ever been to the point where you didn't know what to pray for? Man, I've been there. You've been to that point where you just didn't even know what to pray. But luckily, and the good news is this, that He says, likewise the Spirit also helps in our weakness, for we do not know what we should pray for as we ought. But the Spirit Himself makes intercession for us. See, when we get to the lowest of the lows, when we're in the pits, when we're in the prisons, when we get to the lowest of the lows, the Spirit will intercede for us. The Spirit will give us power that we need. When they're trying to crush our dream, when it may be a person, and it doesn't have to be a person. Maybe a situation tries to crush that dream. Know that when you don't know what to pray for, the Spirit makes intercession for us. Verse 27. Now He who searches the hearts knows what the mind of the Spirit is, because He makes intercession for the saints according to the will of God. Verse 28. Here's what we're going to focus on. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. Let me read that again. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. Doesn't that sound a little bit like what Joseph said in Genesis chapter 50? You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. In other words, we know that all things work together for the good. Now let's take that verse, and we're going to do an emphasize exercise here. Verse 28. And we know. Say no. No. We know. That means we know without a shadow of a doubt that God is going to work whatever pit, whatever prison, whatever situation you're in, He's going to work it to good. We know that for a fact, based upon this word. We know that without any shadow of a doubt. Because either we believe this thing or we don't, right?
Right.
We either believe it or we don't. And if we believe it, then we have to say with confidence that I know that no matter what pit I'm in, no matter who's trying to crush my dream, no matter if my dream looks crushed, I know that somehow or another, God's going to work this together. I know. It's a fact based upon this. He says, we know that all things, say all things. All things. That means everything, whether good or bad. God can take the good or the bad and work it together somehow. Now looking at Joseph's story, if you read chapter 37 to 50, and you see how Joseph's life went, I'm sure in his mind he thought, how's this going to work out? I'm in a pit, they're up there eating lunch, they're leaving me for dead. I'm sold into slavery, who knows what's going to happen? Then he's head over to this Potiphar's house. He thinks, hey, this is great. All of a sudden he's thrown in jail for rape, for false accusations. How's this going to work out? Oh, here we go. I give the butler an interpretation of his dream. He'll remember me. I'll get out of here. No. But some way or another, we know that all things work together for good to those who, what? See, there's a condition there. It doesn't apply to everybody. It says to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. The band will come.
Like you say, brother.
There's a word there that we sometimes miss, and I want to go back to that verse 28. It says, and we know. Now, I've missed that before. It's not a big word. It's not that big of a deal other than this. When I was reading it and studying it this week, I was like, I missed that word we before. I've read it, I'm sure, but we, and we know. That tells us one thing. We're not alone. There's brothers and sisters that are sitting around you right now that know. We know. And so there's times when you feel alone in a pit. You got to realize that there's other people around you who know. We know that all things work together. You know, in 1 Peter he says, don't think it strange, brethren, when you fall into various trials, as if something strange happened to you. I've always used this illustration of like if you were playing football and you're out on the field and they pass you the ball and you catch it. Would you be surprised if you got tackled? No, it's supposed to happen. And so it's like he's saying, don't be surprised if something happens to your dream or somebody attacks you or something like that, because it's just part of life. Don't think it's strange. Don't think it's strange. I think of, how many of you watched any of Whitney Houston's funeral this past week? Anybody? A few of you? We kind of flipped back and forth this weekend, and I tell you what, you look at a situation like that, a woman with such talent, and you think, man, what a waste, the way things ended up. There's so many different people you see, movie stars and things like that, have such great talent. And of course, we don't know the whole story, but you look at it and you think, man, just what a waste. But then, I was thinking about this passage of Scripture, and it came to me as we were kind of watching some of it. If you got to watch any of that, the thing that, if there's something good that came out of that, and it worked together for the good, I'm going to tell you something. For 3 or 4 hours, the gospel was preached.
Come on.
I was totally amazed. Because of her death, for 4 hours, people that normally wouldn't sit in a church got to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I thought, man, that is just amazing. T.D. Jakes, Tyler Perry, who you never would have thought, preached. You know, I mean, just so much. And you wonder, you look at your own life and you say, how's this going to work out? You know what? So many times we spend so much time wondering how it's going to work out. We miss the ride along the way. And we miss the things along the way. Stop worrying about how it's going to turn out. Just know that it is going to turn out for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you're floating around in a pit somewhere and you feel like you're just all by yourself. Listen, today's the day to get your dream back. You know, I believe that Joseph never stopped dreaming. I believe he continued hoping and knowing that that dream would come to pass. I truly believe that. But he never gave up hope on that. And don't give up hope. Will you stand? Maybe you've never accepted Christ's gift of salvation. I'd invite you to come. Maybe you want me to agree in prayer with you about something this morning. Maybe a dream you have. Whatever it might be, I'd ask you to come as we sing.
Don't hit that.
There is
given us the strength that we need. I pray, God, that as we go over these next several weeks and talk about the dream pillars, that you would just put on our heart, lay on our heart a dream, a vision, a goal that we can head towards, a purpose and a calling that you have for us. Help us to go after that, and no matter what speed bumps happen along the way, that you just help us to not focus on those, but just focus on the dream you have, and know that you will work things out together for good to those of us who love you, Lord. We just pray a special blessing for you, Lord, here today. To guide, guard us, and direct us as we go.